It's time to get the story behind the story. Interviews with newsmakers, news breakers, and Vermonters making a difference. WCAX presents 802 News with Mark Johnson. Here's Mark.
Vermont Attorney General Charity Clark has joined multiple suits against the Trump administration since the inauguration, roughly one a week. In this edition of 802 News, sponsored by Red Hen Baking Company, Clark outlines the goal of those suits, some of which challenge whether Trump has exceeded his authority as the head of the executive branch. For example, one suit she's part of, with other Democratic attorneys general, questions whether the appointment of Elon Musk as head of a program designed to root out fraud, waste, and abuse is constitutional. She also discussed whether she's considering a run for higher office and why she returned to Vermont after a stint as an attorney in New York City. We begin our discussion in a moment. At Red Hen Baking Company, they believe pure, uncomplicated ingredients in the hands of skilled artisans are the building blocks for great food. They're dedicated to creating the best food from the best ingredients. You'll find an ever-changing lineup of delicious pastries, sandwiches, and soups at their beautiful cafe off Route 2 in Middlesex, just off I-89. Their breads are also available in many other locations. Led by owners Randy George and Eliza Kane, Red Hen Baking Company has been on the leading edge of the local food movement since 1999. Can you give us a short rundown of the cases that the AG's office is involved in against the Trump administration?
I can. This is a good quiz. Okay, first and most recently, we sued regarding the illegal and unconstitutional firing of Department of Education staff, of trying to gut the Department of Education in half. Next lawsuit was over federal employees who were fired in an illegal mass layoff. Then there was a case that was against Elon Musk and Doge, and that was regarding the unlawful delegation of authority, giving too much power to someone who didn't go through the proper process. The next was the National Institutes of Health, the NIH grants case. That, of course, affected us here in Vermont because the University of Vermont receives many millions of dollars of NIH grants. Then the Treasury Department lawsuit, and that was a lawsuit regarding illegally providing Elon Musk and friends with access to data that they were not supposed to have access to. The OMB memo case was with regards to the funding freeze of federal funds that was, again, illegal and unconstitutional. And then we have the birthright citizenship lawsuit that was in response, I think, the day after the inauguration, to the illegal and unconstitutional ban on birthright citizenship.
Which of these cases do you think has the most direct impact on Vermonters?
Well, it kind of depends on who you are, but I would say that the one that's probably the most widespread involves the OMB memo case. Although first runner-up goes to the privacy issue with regards to allowing people who are unauthorized and not properly vetted to have access to all of our private data that is in the Treasury Department.
Okay. What are you trying to accomplish?
Well, I mean, when I was sworn in, I swore an oath, and the oath said that I would uphold the Constitution of the United States. So it's my duty to do that work. When Donald Trump is violating the Constitution and federal law, it is my job to represent Vermont in rectifying that. And so far, I think he's been in office for 7 weeks, and we've had to sue 7 times.
You were in the office, you were chief of staff for T.J. Donovan back in 2017. I read that over the course of Donald Trump's tenure, there were 62 cases filed. The office was successful in 60 of them. How is your approach different than back then, or the same?
I think it's largely the same, other than in the beginning last time, I think there was a slow start where some of the attorneys general didn't really know what to do and thought, this isn't going to keep going, is it? Let's give this a chance. I think a lot of us actually thought that generally about the first Trump administration, but this time we were ready. And from the first day that all of these executive orders went online, we were reviewing them, analyzing them to see if they were actionable, and we needed to bring a lawsuit. And lo and behold, we did almost immediately have to bring a lawsuit.
How do you decide where to take what to take action or not to take action?
It's not like I'm cherry picking. It's every single time he's violating the Constitution or federal law, we're there.
Okay.
Well, can I
Yeah.
provide there is one limitation. If the state of Vermont is not the proper party to bring the lawsuit, then I'm obviously not going to sue. That's called standing. It might be that there's an individual who has standing but the state doesn't, or a nonprofit or something who has standing but the state doesn't. So in those cases, I can't bring the lawsuit. But if we're the right party and the law has been violated, I will bring the lawsuit.
You're joining with other state attorneys general and also some local folks in some of the cases. Why does anybody care what a state with 600,000 people think about this?
Every state has their own unique attributes. One of the things that, well, of course, I'm a 10th generation Vermonter on both sides of my family. I've spent most of my life in this wonderful place, and I'm kind of a snob and think we're the best. So right away, of course, they care about us because I think we're the best. But you're right, we are very small. But we have a perspective that is unique. We are the state, other than the District of Columbia, who most resoundingly did not vote for our current president. We are a state that enshrined the right to abortion in our Constitution by 100% of the towns in our state voted to do that. And so we have a perspective that I think is very clear. And in some ways, it makes my job as Attorney General easy. I don't have to wonder what the people of Vermont are thinking. It's very clear the majority are united about a lot of these ideas, and it makes it kind of easy for me.
Okay, that raises a question for me. So to what extent are filing these cases political as opposed to legal?
They're all legal. You know, I'm the Attorney General. I am an attorney. I swore an oath. I am governed by the rules of ethics. And this year's my 20th year practicing law. I have a lot of experience under my belt. So while I'm always mindful of the fact that I am a statewide elected leader and I always want to show up for Vermonters in that space of being a leader, when it comes to filing lawsuits, my obligation is as a lawyer, and I'm doing right by the people of Vermont and by the state of Vermont in bringing those lawsuits.
All right. You said recently that when you were talking about the 2017 approach as compared to today, you said he would do something kind of crazy and there would be a moment of disbelief or people giving him the benefit of the doubt, which is what you were just saying before. And you said now we're just playing a very different game. He's doing something outlandish and blatantly unconstitutional, and we're responding in a unified fashion. That sounds almost more political than legal to me.
Well, it's not. Well, it is political in that so far it's only been Democratic attorneys general who have brought these lawsuits. I wouldn't be surprised if at some point that changes because some of the action, well, most of the actions really are truly egregious. I mean, let's not forget that I think the first judge to rule on one of these said it was a Reagan-appointed judge who'd been on the bench for 40 years and said in 40 years he'd never seen something more unconstitutional. So they are pretty egregious. So in that way, it's political, but that's just the way that it has fallen out. The Democratic attorneys general views are mostly unified, although you'll see it does vary how many of us. There's 23 of us. Sometimes, there'll only be 20 people signing on, or 19 or 22. Not everybody is always signing on to every single lawsuit. But I wouldn't say it's political. We try to be good leaders for our states, but ultimately we are lawyers representing our states in court.
How is this coalition formed of the attorneys general?
Well, there's three major national organizations involving attorneys general. The first is the National Association of Attorneys General, unfortunately called NAG. And NAG has been instrumental since a landmark settlement occurred in 1998, the Big Tobacco settlement. And since that time, NAG has performed a really critical role of being that kind of central entity for us. Unfortunately, over the recent years, the attorneys general have been more fractured by party. Something called the Republican Association of Attorneys General or Republican it's called RAGA. And they're the Republicans. And then there's DAGA, the Democrats. And so sometimes, for me, I know the Republicans except for our friend in New Hampshire, I know him from other ways, but the Republicans I know from NAG, and I recently joined the board of NAG, but the Democrats I know from the Democratic Attorney General Association. I'm also on the board of that organization. And I will say we work really well together in a variety of issues. And when it's not an issue that we have disagreements on, we work really well together regardless of party. That occurred certainly way back in the day with the tobacco settlement, but more recently, the social media cases and investigations that we've done have been incredibly bipartisan. And there's all kinds of issues, especially related to consumer issues, that we are unified on regardless of party. And we try to do what we can for the people of our states, and we collaborate well and work together. And, I do have a lot of colleagues who are Republicans in other states and enjoy working with them and fighting the good fight for our folks.
Have you talked to any of them and asked them why they're not joining in?
I don't want to say what those private conversations might be. So I think I'll pass.
Well, okay. Have you talked to them though?
I don't want to answer that. Because it's
Okay.
private. Look, for me, I'm saying it's very easy. I know where I stand. I know where Vermont stands. I think for some of these Republican attorneys general, they may personally have a viewpoint and feel that their state is very vulnerable. They may have a lot of concerns about the retribution that they would experience if they spoke out. I mean, they might, for all I know, they could be strategically thinking, okay, if it gets to this point, that's when we have to speak up. And I do think, unfortunately, there probably will come that point. And I hope that the Republican attorneys general will be ready and remember that they serve America and not Donald Trump.
That was actually the kind of insight I was looking for by asking that question.
Yeah.
So that's helpful. How confident are you that the courts can look at these cases objectively, independently, because of the same concern you just raised?
I would say I'm pretty confident. And so far in these past 7-8 weeks, we've seen the courts respond in a way that has been very reasonable. And so I do have a lot of faith in the system. And I so far have not seen something that has changed that view.
Go back here. You talked about the coalition that you have, which could clearly use some rebranding names. But how do you get together weekly on Zoom? How do you coordinate?
The specific coalition with regards to these federal issues that we're dealing with right now, we talk pretty regularly, pretty much every day. We're on the phone talking to each other, and that is right now, but really this has been in motion for many months. I mean, before the election even, we were planning and preparing for this potential eventuality and getting our staffs together to kind of think about what are the issues. Donald Trump did make it a little easy for us because of Project 2025. And while he said he was not supporting that, clearly his actions speak louder than his words, and he is supporting that and trying to codify all of that, not codify because he's doing it by executive order, but he's trying to put in place all of the elements of that Project 2025. So it was very long. Yes, we had staff people read the whole thing, and it helped us prepare about what's coming, what's next, and we could act and move quickly, and we have done that.
Where do you draw the line between what is the right of a president to do because they're the president of the United States as opposed to what's not?
Something that's really important for me is I want people to know that I fully accept that Donald Trump won this election, and he has every right to put his vision in place for this country. That is what the people voted for. It's not what I voted for. It's not what most of Vermont voted for, but that is absolutely true. The people who voted for Donald Trump did not, however, vote to violate the Constitution or federal law, nor could they. And that is the problem. The implementation of his vision must be done in a way that does not violate our system of democracy, our courts, the Constitution, or federal law.
Okay, let me try an example here. The creation of Doge, run by Elon Musk, is something that you and your group are challenging. Where's the constitutional problem with that?
So one of the problems and we see the themes that are kind of strung throughout a lot of these cases. One of the problems is that Donald Trump has not valued the three branches of government. This country fought against a king famously and then created these three branches as a checks and balances. We all learned this in like sixth grade or something, right? And Congress has certain roles that it plays, and the executive branch does not play that role. The president does not play that role. And so what I think we're seeing is Donald Trump kind of trying to stretch the role that his branch plays. He's done that with the spending issues. He's done that with appointment issues. Not vetting the person he's trying to appoint as he should have. And the separation of powers, that's a huge problem that runs through all these cases. The other one with the Constitution is with not so much the three branches, but rather federalism. We have this amazing, wonderful system where we have a United States of America, and then we have the individual states, and we are sovereign states with our own rights. And we've seen Donald Trump disrespect that as well. That's critical to our whole sense of democracy in the United States. I mean, in some ways, I'm sure people might think it's strange that little Vermont has our own personality, our own culture, and we're right next to New Hampshire. And, God forbid someone confuse someone from New Hampshire and Vermont. I mean, we have the New Hampshire AG and I, not to get into it, but we have a job that we have to do every 7 years to measure the boundary between our states. And we get together and we rib each other on like which state's better. But we're so tiny, probably other people are like, really? New Hampshire is all that different than Vermont? We are sovereign states and we deserve that respect. And legally, we have rights. So that's another one of Donald Trump's favorites to violate. The third one I'll mention is a federal law called the Administrative Procedures Act, or the APA. Basically, what that does is it tells the executive branch how it conducts business. Here's what you have to do. And there's sometimes, there needs to be a public hearing or things are warned or whatever. And Donald Trump just repeatedly has violated that. And he did it the last time too. Probably half of the lawsuits we brought, maybe more, involved a violation of that particular statute.
Okay. I was going to ask you what the difference was between the 62 cases filed during the first term, 2017 to 2021, compared to now. Is that it?
No, I think it's really different. For one thing, and maybe it's because, just like we knew what to do, Donald Trump learned a thing or two round one, and now he's ready in a different way too. The dismantling of the federal bureaucracy has been pretty wild to watch. I mean, these are programs that we rely on. Our taxpayer dollars are working for us there, and it's really appalling to see. When we were looking at the beginning of this adventure here for me at Trump 1, as we call it, and seeing what kind of lawsuits were brought, most of the lawsuits were based on the environment. And I don't think we've had one yet based, you just heard me list them. That's not what they're based on. Really, a lot of these are based on this trying to control where the money goes, trying to control the structure, trying to, do away with programs, that kind of thing. And we aren't really yet seeing this assault on the environment. So I was all, ready to stand up for Mother Earth like a good Vermonter. And so far that hasn't come up. I mean, it has come up, but it hasn't come up yet in our lawsuits. So I think maybe they're developing some of that, and it hasn't quite reached the level yet where we are ready to bring an action. But round one, that was a lot of what was done.
What can you name for me? What were a couple of the big ones in that? I'm trying to remember.
I mean, it was stuff like, I'm riffing here, but it was things like, drilling in the wildlife refuge, things like that. I think there's just been a different tactic taken where he's really going to the core of what he viewed as previously standing in his way. Well, I would say what's standing in his way is the Constitution, and he thinks it's the individuals working for the federal government. And so that's really where he seems to have targeted his rage and his desire to install this vision that he has for the country.
Can you be a little more specific about my question about Elon Musk and the creation of Doge? How is that how is that not something he should be allowed to do?
Well, I don't have the brief in front of me, but let me give you an example. So I've heard people say, "Oh, well, Doge is just a renaming of an office that already existed," but that office didn't exist in that way. So again, I don't have the brief in front of me, but in my when I'm thinking about this, I'm thinking about what are the boundaries, what is the specific authority given to the executive branch from Congress about that particular office. When it comes to Elon Musk, there are certain steps that leaders have to take. And you see this conflict with public statements made about Elon Musk. On the one hand, he's in charge, he's doing great things. Then you go to court, it's, oh, he's not really in charge. The lack of transparency, I would just, as more of an aside, also really bothers me because the irony of them saying, oh, we're doing this because people deserve transparency. And then, oh, but no one's going to talk about how we have no transparency with Elon Musk and his investments and his background and whether he was vetted appropriately. I was appalled when it came out that some of the young workers working at Doge were not remotely even Googled. And yet they're given access to sensitive data. I just find that to be really sloppy work, and it's very disappointing. So, but generally coming back, so no, this isn't quite as specific as you wanted, but generally the takeaway is that Congress gets to decide, okay, here's the money, here's what you're going to do with it, and then the executive branch is executing that. And when it's outside the scope of that, we have a problem.
One of the cases that you signed on to, one of the more recent ones, involves targeting the law firm that worked for Hillary Clinton. How does that affect me or anybody else as a Vermonter?
Well, this, to quote the judge, should send a little chill down your spine because it is appalling targeting the law firm that is representing your opponent. Now, as a lawyer in Vermont, everyone is friends with each other. You go to the holiday party for the Chittenden County Bar Association. Now that's a good time. Everyone's there. We're on opposite sides, but we're collegial. That's how it should work. The weaponization of the judicial system by Donald Trump has been incredibly concerning. And this one in particularly it's horrifying. Keep in mind, we have lawyers because not everybody can represent themselves in court. Not everybody, even me, the Attorney General, am I going to do my own will? No, I'm going to hire a lawyer who knows about wills to do my will. Everyone deserves to have that representation. And to target law firms, which are businesses, who represent someone opposed to a powerful person and use your power to intimidate and close that business. I mean, were they disbarred? No, they did, representation, as we all do as lawyers. I think that is incredibly disturbing. I'm sure all lawyers who are watching this are horrified, and it's demoralizing. But also, I think a lot of what Donald Trump has done is really destabilizing. I mean, to industry, to our sense of repose in our country, with our relationships with our neighbors and friends, Canada, Mexico, and others. I mean, it's been really something to behold. And one thing that I have tried to do is use my office for a force of good to try to get us back on track where the rule of law is respected.
Is there anything that your office can do about the tariffs?
The tariffs are truly a federal issue. We're always looking at everything to make sure there isn't a place for us, a role that we should be playing. And that's no exception, but especially as Vermonters who live so close to Canada, and it really is, even that is truly shocking. Some of the stuff that Donald Trump, I felt like I was ready, and some of the stuff that he's done has been truly shocking because it doesn't make any sense. So that's why it's so surprising. Why would you do this? It's not going to help anyone. Give
me an example of one that falls into that category that you didn't anticipate.
That the tariffs one is a big one, and also the fact that he did it once and the stock market started to tank. I was like, okay, all right, we're not gonna. We've finally lost the game of chicken, but then we're going back again for more. So that's definitely on the list of items that surprised me. I think that when it comes to when it comes to the international relations kind of department, another area that's outside of my purview as Attorney General, but you asked what surprised me. I think something that has surprised me this round is that Donald Trump, he doesn't just like take it to the brink. He really does the thing he says. Where last time it felt like he would say crazy things and then someone would dial him down, or he would have the discipline to not go that far. And this time he really is taking it that far. And it's hard to watch. Unfortunately, it will be a long, I'm not going to say 4 years because the midterms, I think I have a lot of hope for the midterms, and I think we'll turn the trajectory just like we did last time when America gets to vote again on their Congress people next year.
I would imagine there are people that are asking the same question I'm about to ask you in terms of resources of your office. Is this something that you have the capability, the capacity to be taking on and not working on? I mean, I'm sure you have plenty to do other than this.
It is a lot, to be sure. We are working, those of us who are focused on this are working, nights and weekends, and it is a lot, but that's also what we signed up to do. So we're doing it with pride. A lot of people feel really helpless right now, but not my office. We know we have a job to do and we're doing it. So we have a lot of pride in that. That being said, there is a lot of work that we are having to do, and at some point it's not really sustainable. We also have, the division that does this work there's only 2 lawyers. We are the smallest in the country. And so based on this and other cases we have, I do think it's time for us to add another lawyer onto that team, and I've requested that of the legislature, and we'll see what happens.
You mentioned the Chittenden County Bar. Thank you for providing me that opportunity, because I think one of the questions that people have when they look at legal enforcement in this state, we're having a lot of issues here in Chittenden County, in Burlington in particular. And is there any capacity that your office has to help with the backlog here of cases, what some people feel is the sort of revolving door of justice, people getting the kind of catch and release?
Well, our system, our criminal justice system here in Vermont is pretty unique. We have state's attorneys who are the county prosecutors responsible for public safety in their counties, and then the attorney general who has a concurrent jurisdiction, meaning the same kind of right to bring cases statewide. And the attorney general has additional duties and kind of power. The relationship that we have with the state's attorneys is one where we focus on the most violent crime. When a violent crime like a homicide occurs in that state's attorney's county, we are in touch and happy to help out. We help out with and take over in some cases those violent crimes, sexual assaults, homicides. However, we're deferential to the state's attorneys. Moreover, our system means that the local police don't call us first. They call the state's attorneys. That's how that works. Our office contains a little law enforcement agency of its own called the Internet Crimes Against Children Task Force, ICAC. And ICAC focuses on child sexual assault, child sexual abuse material, formerly known as child pornography. And they come to us first. So that's where we're getting a lot of our cases. And then we, of course, get involved in different cases in addition. For example, Addison County has had some issues recently, so we are more involved in that county perhaps than others. But that's our system. And I have been, as a rule, very deferential to the independently elected county state's attorneys. And that's because I don't think I know better than the people who voted for whoever your state's attorney is in your county. And I'm not going to step in and say I know better than the voters in that county. So I've tried to be supportive. I've tried to make sure the state's attorneys know I'm available and do the best job I can with the kind of role that I have, but also just being mindful that these are independently elected people. I do not supervise them. The voters are the ones in charge.
Have you offered help to Chittenden County?
Yes, we offer help to all the counties.
And no takers on that?
I can't, without having a list in front of me, I'm not sure if we currently have a case in Chittenden County. One that didn't come from ICAC. I'll have to think about it. But we certainly are currently handling a number of cases that originated in the state's attorney's office. I'm just not sure about of Chittenden.
What's going on in Addison County?
The state's attorney there was charged with DUI. And so there's been, fallout there, and we've had to handle some of the cases. In addition, it's obviously an uncomfortable situation because we're also the ones who are prosecuting that state's attorney.
It's interesting what your actual job is because, for example, you have to defend the state of Vermont in cases. I'm thinking of the lawsuit that was filed by lawmakers on the appointment of the education secretary.
Yep.
And I thought you represented the people and not necessarily the administration. So that was sort of a new piece of information to me.
Yeah, we represent the state.
Does that pose a conflict for you if that's something that you see a problem with?
I mean, in terms of an actual legal conflict, we would wall that off, and we do that sometimes. But we wear many different hats. I mean, people think of the Attorney General as doing criminal work, but actually out of our 100 lawyers, only 6 of them are in the criminal unit. And then we have...
Is that right?
Mm-hmm, and we have 2 who do Medicaid fraud. So that's a different... But yeah, it's like probably less than 10% of our lawyers are criminal lawyers. And serving the state as their lawyer is a big part of what we do. We defend, we're doing appeals, we are advising the legislature, we're advising the administration, all different departments and agencies. And of course, we have the Consumer Assistance Program to help consumers and others with problems. And then we bring cases on behalf of the state in a civil court as a I'm a lowercase p prosecutor kind of. We are bringing cases in environmental context against people who violate the Consumer Protection Act. We also get involved with civil rights in the employment context. I mean, yes, we do a wide variety of things. That is pretty common for a law firm, and we are a little tiny kind of law firm in a way. And so we have the same systems in place to protect, if there's a conflict, to make sure we're walling someone off. And like I said, we do that all the time. So yeah, it can be a little uncomfortable, but the important thing is that we just show up as professionals. We're going to do the best job we can do to serve the people and the state. That's our job as lawyers, and certainly my job as an elected official, and that's what we're going to keep doing.
Because you've been critical of the appointment of somebody like Elon Musk to run Doge, and I'm wondering, so what do you do if you don't agree with the chief executive here in Vermont? For example, this case that involved the education secretary.
Well, I would not compare those two things at all. I mean, for example, they did bring Zoe Saunders to the legislature, and they interviewed her and talked with her, and they voted. I mean, they did the things they were supposed to do.
They did reject her, and then he made an interim appointment.
Yes, which has been upheld in the court. So we are where we are. But the important thing for me as a lawyer is I am going to serve the person the Vermonters asked me, when they elected me, that's what they did. We want you to be our lawyer, and that's what I'm doing. I think that there are opportunities to advise our clients in all kinds of different arenas, and they rely on us for different things. Not all the work we do is litigation. Sometimes we are advising on contracts and doing transactional work like that. So we definitely wear different hats.
You mentioned the Medicaid cases. Is that because that's federal money involved? You prosecute a number of
Medicaid fraud.
Yeah.
So Medicaid fraud we get a grant from the federal government for that, and it's like a share. We pay some stuff too. But Medicaid fraud, the kind of concept is when someone is taking Medicaid dollars and they're not using the money appropriately. Now, that could be straight up like stealing the money. It could be they're not providing the services to the patients that they were supposed to be providing. We gave you money to take care of this person, and now look, they're sick or whatever. And so we get involved. A lot of the cases there relate to long-term care situations or, the elderly, disabled people, and they're protecting those vulnerable people while protecting, the Medicaid dollars. And I don't know the history of how that came about, but that's kind of what that's like. And they're very strict rules that grant. So they actually have to be in a kind of separate office, and we can't share materials and everything. So they're very thrifty with the expenses that they're doing. And so, but they are in our office, and and it is a joint program in terms of the expense. It's purely our program in the office. But yeah, they do really good work. They have investigators, paralegal, and two lawyers.
Go back to Trump here. What was your reaction when Trump took Russia off the cybersecurity list?
You're asking me because of my interest in cybersecurity. And in general, I have a lot of concerns relating to this administration and cybersecurity, data security, and scams. For one thing, he has been very enthusiastic about cryptocurrency. Well, my office sees a lot of cryptocurrency in one area, scams, a favorite currency of scammers because it is untraceable. It's like cash, only worse because someone doesn't have to physically pick your pocket. They can just do it online. When you look at the list, for example, of that, I ask for, hey, give me what are the top biggest losses of scams, like amount of money people
I read
lost.
your site this morning on that, and it was familiar and troubling
I know.
at the same time.
And a lot of it, most of those is cryptocurrency. So now we have someone who I keep wondering if there's like something about cryptocurrency I'm missing. So then I'll read more and I'm like, nope, haven't changed my opinion about this at all. It just seems like a bad idea. Of course, as a consumer lawyer, of course, I'm going to think it's a bad idea because I think consumer protection makes the marketplace healthy. And I really believe it doesn't just protect people, but it protects the marketplace. So to have someone like him leaning into cryptocurrency and not thinking it should be regulated, doing away with the CFPB, very concerning. And yeah, Russia does not have a great reputation when it comes to cybersecurity and being a friend to the United States. Obviously, I have lots of concerns about that. And frankly, just the cavalier way that Elon Musk has approached the destruction of the federal government has been concerning, and access to the data of Americans. What we're talking about when we say data that I'm like truly concerned about, setting aside whatever private, our own privacy, like we're allowed to be our wonderful, weird selves and no one needs to, have access to our private diaries or whatever. But setting that aside and just focusing on the fiscal risk, our social security number, anything that's about us that can be identified, our bank account number, but using that, someone could steal our identity. They could just be able to log into accounts and steal our money. And that's what we are doing all day long at the Consumer Assistance Program in my office. We're helping consumers who are worried about this in some fashion or another. They're worried about their money. And we get over like 4,000 or 5,000 scam reports every year. Scams, it's constant, right? All of us are getting scam calls, scam texts, scam emails. Have you ever looked at your spam folder in your email? It's like appalling. You cannot believe, right, how many people are in there. So it's really unnerving. No one even answers their phones anymore because they're assuming they're getting scammed. But now we have a president who, instead of leading on that to protect consumers, to make sure there's a healthy marketplace, I don't even know what the second part of my sentence is because I honestly don't know why he's doing this. It doesn't make any sense. So yes, I definitely have concerns with his approach to protecting privacy and protecting data security.
How much more capacity do you have on these suits? You can't possibly keep up the pace that if you have the number of cases that have already been filed in 7-8 weeks here, you can't possibly keep up that pace, right?
We have one wonderful benefit, and that is the so far only Democratic attorneys general have banded together, and we have economies of scale. So yes, I only have 100 lawyers, and I only have 2 lawyers in the division that's doing this work. But I'm with New York, 900 lawyers, Massachusetts, 600 lawyers, Illinois, 700 lawyers. We have all of these lawyers. And by the way, the staff are just as enthusiastic as you're hearing in my voice. I am. So we have all these people working together, and sometimes someone else is going to take lead. Once in a great while, yes, Vermont is taking the lead. You're right. Most of the time, we're just trying to make sure that we're in the lawsuit and it looks like a good idea, and they have the Vermont specific information that needs to be in there if that indeed does need to be in there. And sometimes we do get to be the leaders. So, and you know what else we should point out? Each attorney general has their own background and experience. So I'm going to give you an example. Great guy, AG of Connecticut. He has birthright citizenship. Well, talking to him with his perspective about that case was really meaningful. And it kind of was like, well, he's like the perfect spokesperson here. He's lived this. And so anyway, and everyone has their own kind of experience. And I have my own experience that I bring to the table. I think I'm probably the only consumer lawyer, for example, among the AGs with experience working. Before I became chief of staff at the AG's office, I was a consumer lawyer for like 4 years. So I had all that experience. And then when I was chief of staff, I supervised the consumer assistance program. So I have a lot of that experience under my belt. So we're collaborating and it works well. You're right. It's a burden, but we're going to keep doing this work. I truly have said I'm grateful for the other 22 Democratic attorneys general, but the truth is if I was the only one, we would still have brought every single one of these lawsuits. It just would have been very painful, but we would have done it because we have to. I swore an oath. It's our job as Vermonters and my job as the attorney general of this amazing state to make sure that we are holding those accountable who violate federal law and the Constitution.
You mentioned early on there that you're a 10th generation Vermonter, and I was trying to do the math on that and figure out how you could even go back that far. I mean, I'm thinking, I guess if a generation is 25 years, maybe that makes sense. That leads me to this question. So you went to the University of Vermont.
Yes.
Then you went to Boston College for law school.
Yep.
You worked at Downs, Racklin and Martin. Then you went to New York and worked for a law firm. Why'd you come back?
I was pregnant and was like, forget this place. I'm going home. So I packed up my suitcases. I was so pregnant I couldn't help the movers. So I packed up 2 suitcases and my cross-country skis, 7 months pregnant, hopped in the car, came home. No regrets. I didn't even go back to New York for a few years. Actually, Hamilton came out and I was like, ooh, really wish I was in New York for this, but otherwise, no regrets. Well, when I was in New York, I was in Vermont all the time and coming home all the time. All of my New York friends were like, this lady's obsessed with Vermont. I mean, it was probably just a matter of time. To be honest, it feels so good to be back. It's been over 10 years now and it hasn't really worn off. It's still just, I guess I like to say that I love Vermont like someone who grew up here, but also like a New Yorker. And one of my subway stops, the 47th Street and 6th, had a almost life-size Stratton advertisement. I grew up in Southern Vermont skiing at Stratton, and it was just like the slopes and a almost life-size person skiing. And I just was like, this should be a portal that I just step into, and then I step out and skis at Stratton. So
clearly a message there in that sign.
Yeah, I was practically clinging to it, like, take me home.
You hiked the long trail?
Yes.
Continuous or in sections?
I did it in sections. I started the summer I turned 7, and I finished when I was 45, maybe 46.
Wow. Okay.
Yep.
And now you're doing the Catamount Trail. How far along are you on that?
It's not very, because last year was a terrible winter for cross-country skiing. This year was a great winter for cross-country skiers who weren't defending the country against Donald Trump.
Yeah. Huh. You going to run for governor someday?
I am very happy being Attorney General right now. I have a big important job with a not great president leading the country. So I'm happy to be here now.
You sound like you were ready for that question.
People have asked me a lot lately.
Why do you think that is?
I think it's because they're looking for leadership and someone they can believe in who reflects their values and their vision for what Vermont should be.
You mentioned even on your website, you're the first woman who's been Attorney General. Why is that significant? What difference has that made?
Well, I will say something interesting that surprised me. When I first became Attorney General and kind of when I was running, it was women lawyers who were so excited, and I saw myself in them. Like, this is why I ran, is because I didn't have someone to look to and say, yeah, a woman can do this. You know, a woman can reach the top of our profession. When I was a little girl, Madeline Kunin was governor. I looked up to her. I was so incredibly proud that Vermont was so cool. We had a lady governor. And I followed her career. And when I was in college, I read her memoir that came out, Living a Political Life, made a huge impact on me. I still have my copy that she had autographed when I was in college. And lawyers didn't have that. And frankly, none of us have since Madeline. We've had a lot of great statewide leaders, and now we have Congresswoman Ballant, which is awesome. But I really feel, I was, to be honest, I started out thinking, who am I going to recruit to run for AG next? And every person I came up with, I would think, I'm actually more electable than they are. And I think I want to be Attorney General more than they do. I think maybe I should be the one to run. When it comes, that wasn't your question though. Your question was what impact has it made? And I'm telling you about the women lawyers. But I also think that I have been able to focus on issues that previously maybe weren't focused on quite as much. We had great AGs. My whole life, we have had great AGs. But, domestic violence is an issue that comes to mind. We, in the AG's office, house the Domestic Violence Fatality Review Commission, a group of stakeholders who review the domestic violence fatalities every year and then provide recommendations to the legislature. I decided I was going to elevate that and have the recommendations come out by statute on the third Tuesday of January. And I was like, let's have a press conference. We're going to call our friends in the legislature to let them know what the recommendations are, how important they are, how impactful we think they'll be, because it's based on an analysis of people who died. It's like, what could we have done better to save this person's life? I mean, it's massive, important issues. The other thing that is stunning is that the impact of domestic violence in Vermont is humongous, and people don't talk about it and they don't realize it. There are 40,000 victims of domestic and sexual violence in Vermont every year. It is massive. And I knew, well, I was given this bully pulpit and I'm going to use it to amplify this issue. And so that's an example. And I'll tell you, at that press conference, I mean, there were people there who have told me they were fighting tears just to have someone in the position of Attorney General recognizing their work and recognizing the issue. So that's been very gratifying. I've tried to do that, to identify areas that maybe the previous administrations in the past just haven't focused on because they didn't have the experience that I've had. So I've really tried to keep an eye on that. I mean, I think it's significant that in this era of where we have a misogynist as the president, where we had a Supreme Court that undid the right to abortion that we have and had in this country for over 50 years, I think it's significant to have a woman leader who understands what it's like, who believe me, in my experience as an attorney, I've been told, smile more to the jury and you're too pretty to be a lawyer. I've heard these things that a man would never hear. And it has informed my leadership style and the topics that I have chosen to focus on, as has, frankly, being a mother. I think that has really informed my leadership too.
How's it changed your style? What do you mean by that?
Well, one thing that you'll always hear women leaders describe themselves as is a collaborative leader. Women are always like a collaborative leader. Part of that is that women are expected to be collaborative. And so it's frustrating or not well received if you have a woman who's a much stronger leader. I mean, if Donald Trump were a woman, think about how that would play out. And people, I don't think, would be as excited about her who was acting the way that he's acting. I am fortunate in that I generally lean towards teamwork, and so it comes naturally to me. But I think as the years have passed and as my leadership style has developed and changed, I have definitely leaned into a collaborative leadership style and a sense of teamwork. And I think it works best for me. But I do think one of the reasons why it works well for me is because of my gender.
On a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being terrible, how fearful are you about the next 3 years and 10 months?
I am not excited that we have someone in the White House who's acting this way. I'm also disappointed that the Republican Party has so far not stepped up to do the role that I know they can do. And I mean, I have a lot of Republican friends. I really believe in bipartisanship, as frankly, anyone who spends time in the State House will, because it works. It works in our State House. And it's incredibly disappointing. That being said, I believe in America and our systems very much. I have a lot of faith. I do think some of that isn't faith, it's knowledge. I'm a lawyer. So, for example, when the executive orders all came down that first day, I think a lot of people who didn't have my training would have read those and panicked, but I read them and thought, this doesn't even do anything. It's just a bunch of words. Okay, next one. Some of them did do something. Some of them did literally nothing. And some of them asked an agency or a department to do something. So I'm making my list. Okay, we're going to have let's say, follow that agency or department. We're going to have to see what they do. And this one does something. And then this one is just, this is like Dear Abby, like it goes into space. It's nothing. Okay, ignore. Some of it is just being mean. He just wants a platform to be mean. So I think that we have to keep our focus on what's real, what's actually happening, and not the things that are just straight bloviating, which is harsh, but really some of that, that's what it is.
Should Phil Scott be speaking up more?
That's his choice. Phil Scott's my favorite client, as I like to joke. He is my client, and I have great respect for his style of leadership. I do think we have slightly different leadership styles and different strengths. So I'm not going to tell him how to handle that, but I do value his leadership, and I trust that he knows what he's doing.
That wraps it up for this edition of 802 News, sponsored by Red Hen Baking Company. Thanks for listening.